Hi, you're listening to Sustainably Geeky. This is episode 90. I'm Jennifer, your host, and today I'm speaking with Stacey. She is the author of the book No Paradise with Wolves and creator of The Wild Shift, a family nature connection mentorship. So her book follows the journey of Katie and her partner as they restore their farm in northern Spain while simultaneously learning about and advocating for protection of the local environment and specifically the Iberian wolf. So, Katie, I was really excited to read this book because it's very timely and something that we are kind of talking about in Ireland, although we haven't quite gotten to the phase of reintroductions yet. And I know a lot of places around the world are kind of struggling with this question of reintroducing predators to the natural environment to help balance things out. So, I guess, can you just start by telling us about your background and what inspired you to write this book?
Absolutely. So when we first arrived in Spain, my husband and I were actually traveling a lot for our work. We were kind of nature and wildlife and conservation storytellers, and we did that in numerous ways. We would create documentaries, so we worked on kind of BBC Natural World, the probably the one that people might have seen was about peregrine falcons in Chicago. So we really had a very keen interest, passion for urban wildlife and basically showing people what was on their doorstep. So we were traveling a lot with this kind of nature storytelling, and we realized we could be based anywhere for that. And we had done a project in the south on the Iberian links. At the time that we're doing the project, I think it was 2016, it was the rarest cat in the world. And they were reintroducing them with great success. And so we were kind of down there documenting that. And we just really fell in love with Spain, Spanish culture, and realized that with the work and the way we were traveling, we could be based anywhere. So we started kind of exploring somewhere we wanted to be. And we ended up exploring northern Spain, specifically Asturias. And at the time, I didn't know anything about it. I'd spent a lot of time kind of growing up visiting family in the south of Spain. So, I knew the Costa del Sol quite well. And for me, it was sun and beaches. But the north of Spain is this completely different landscape. It's very rugged, very mountainous, green. And where we're located, we're like in the foothills of the Picos de Europa, and we're half an hour away from a beautiful coastline. And yeah, we just fell in love with it. And then on top of that, the wildlife here is really pretty spectacular. So we came out in 2017, I think it was, and did a little recce and fell in love with this kind of where we've ended up now. Found ourselves a little rental, moved in January 2018, and we've been here ever since.
Well, it's a very captivating story of someone just finding a place and wanting to call it home, because you hear a lot more lately, I feel like, about people who are buying these parcels of land and making them their own and kind of rewilding them. And this is another great example of, I guess, that happening, but also, like you said, just you guys are telling the story of the local wildlife as well. So on that note, before we talk about the plight of the Iberian wolf, can you first explain the role that wolves and other apex predators play in ecosystems and then the consequences when they're removed?
I will try my best. I am not a ecologist, but I have obviously a deep passion for this. But essentially, wolves are what you call keystone species. So they sit right at the top of the kind of ecosystem chain, and every action that they have has a ripple effect, kind of all the way down when you think of an ecosystem. And I think one of the most well known examples of how important wolves are is when they were reintroduced to Yellowstone. And what they found there is that you had these big herbivore herds. Now, without the wolf, these herbivore herds were kind of overgrazing areas, and you were having kind of atrophy and loss of plant diversity, and because there was just too many herbivores and they were all in one space. But as soon as you reintroduced the wolf, you had these herds moving on constantly. You had them being kept kind of under control in terms of population number, And the trickle down effect of that was kind of your plant diversity exploded. And I can't exactly remember why, but beavers came back and the waterways were restored. But it all kind of was tracked back to them reintroducing the wolf. So essentially, they are landscape kind of creators, I suppose. But equally with that, obviously, apex predator title and behavior, they in landscapes which aren't just for nature, which is where we live, where people have livelihoods and have livestock that, cattle and goats and sheep, there is conflict. So I think a lot of the time people think of human wildlife conflict as kind of only been in Africa, on with elephants and lions and the rest of it. But actually, we have human wildlife conflict on our doorstep right here with the wolf and the local farming community. So they're absolutely invaluable in an ecosystem, but it comes with its challenges having them if you're trying to make a life from the land.
Yeah, it's all about balance, isn't it? Like, we think it's a good thing if they're gone because we're safer, but then we don't think about the ripple down effects, like you said. And um, to the example you noted about Yellowstone, I'm sure our listeners and you probably know, there's this very well-known video that documents I think it's called How Wolves Saved a River. And it's basically what you said, like how removing this one species made the river start to erode, essentially because the plants were being eaten away and the roots weren't there, and it kind of changed the literal landscape of just this one species. And like I mentioned earlier, like we're kind of dealing with this where I live in Ireland because the wolves were eradicated, in the 17th century, I believe, as kind of part of colonization, which is its own issue. But essentially, we have a lot of deer here, and obviously we have a lot of sheep as well, but those are brought in by man. And yeah, the landscape is beautiful in Ireland, but it's not natural and it's not what it's supposed to be. And I think you mentioned this in your book, actually, like you look at these green fields sometimes and think, oh, how beautiful and amazing, but then you don't realize it's actually a desert. Like there's no life other than grass, and that's not always a good thing. Sometimes it is, but you know.
Yeah, absolutely. I think especially that example that you use that I do mention in my book is that we've forgotten how to look at landscapes, not just with our eyes, but with kind of all our senses. Like, are we hearing bird call or insects,
Yeah.
And when we look at our eyes, are we not just looking at the big picture? Are we looking at the small stuff? Are we seeing, bird movement or, the signs that there is life there?
Yeah.
We've kind of just we look at landscape and we think, oh, that's pretty, but we don't actually look closely and realize that actually, hang on, there's a lot missing from this picture.
Yeah, it's great for a postcard. I mean, how many postcards of Ireland do you see? And probably your part of the world as well, where it's like, oh, these beautiful rolling hills, but then you're like, actually, the sheep are kind of pests because they're so overrun and they're overeating it, and there needs to be more of a balance. But anyways, that's probably a whole other podcast in itself.
Absolutely.
Okay, so you have kind of laid the groundwork for why these apex predators are important, and you kind of touched on this, but what are some of the common arguments both for and against reintroducing and protecting these predators? Obviously, human wildlife conflict is a big one, but are there other ones that maybe we haven't thought about?
When I say human wildlife conflict, I know in other areas you have different wolf species and they can potentially be a threat to humans. I don't know that for a fact, but here these are quite small wolves and they don't really threaten humans in the traditional sense. You hear the odd story, but actually it does turn out that it tends to be either feral dogs or you have a lot of livestock guardian dogs in the mountains. And actually the majority of conflict I hear about kind of people being in the mountains is dog attacks, because these livestock guardians have a job to do, which is protect the livestock, but they don't differentiate between a wolf or a human or, the rest of it. And then that's a whole topic as well. Then you have people who are in the mountains thinking, oh, the dogs look hungry and feeding the dogs, and then the dogs don't do their job. So there's just so many little details of the picture that make it very complicated ultimately. Mainly in this area, I think, and I mentioned this in the book essentially, is that what you have is an Iberian wolf stronghold, and there's a scientist who was working here and doing research on like attitude to wolf, and she basically visited all these different locations where the wolf existed, the wolf was coming back, and the wolf in the next 10 years was predicted to come back. And she said that essentially where people had been living with wolf forever, they were better equipped to handle it. They were a bit more accommodating of it because they'd never not had to deal with it. But where the wolf was coming back and where the wolf was predicted to come back, you saw massive fear, massive kind of anti-wolf attitude. And certainly in this area, we have, it's an interesting one. I do kind of say at the end of my book that one day we would love to have wolf on at Wildfinker, our property. They are not that far away, actually. Now, as we speak, I can look at a mountain out my window and I know that there's a wolf pair on there. But since they've arrived, the narrative has been very negative, very scared. There was a neighbour from when we first arrived who came over, and my husband guides to show people wolf, mainly in Cantabria. They again have a more of a better, on the whole, a better relationship with the wolf, and they've been there. I guess they're a bit more established, and certainly the sites that he takes people to look and see wolves, they aren't as threatened. Whereas he doesn't show them here because it's harder to see them. I think our landscape's that bit more difficult, and B, they are persecuted more. But he is known locally, and we're known locally that we nature lovers, ecologistas, I'm going to say it wrong, but there's kind of a term for people who kind of are like us, I suppose. And so this old neighbor came over and basically said, that there are wolf up there, and pointed to the mountain. And my husband said, oh, I'm not really, maybe, I don't really know. And he knew, but he didn't really want to kind of, get into it. And the guy said, how do I find them? How do I find them? And Luke was like, well, he basically gave a few examples of how you'd find wolf, nothing you couldn't find on a Google search, So if the guy had just gone online, nothing. But essentially, the guy was terrified because he was about to be putting animals up in the hills, and he was just convinced he was going to lose them all to the wolf. He didn't want to put his livestock guardian dogs up there because he'd had a problem with one biting a tourist, and then there being issues. So he essentially was feeling very scared about putting up his livelihood into the mountains, which traditionally they always have done. But it's a difficult one. It's called a natural park, so in theory it should be, where nature's allowed to exist. But the way he spoke was, how do you find them? Because we're going to deal with it.
Yeah, and I was kind of shocked at the way the hostility against the wolves in that area presented itself, because you gave some examples of some pretty violent actions against the wolves, and wolf heads showing up in not people's homes, but like on the doorsteps of businesses or whatever. So it's a hard one, because you don't want to discount the human cost that's there, but also these animals deserve to live just as much as we do, and we're the reason that their habitat has been degraded so far. So I guess my next question was kind of around that idea that in places where wolves have not been for a while, and they're not in living memory, then it's a lot harder to coexist with them. But have you seen individuals or even entire communities changing their outlook on wolves, and maybe going more of a positive route, or is it, in your personal experience, I guess, mostly been, just still kind of learning to live with them?
Yeah, there are examples of wildlife friendly people. There was an old chap in the mountains on one of our hikes, and he was a traditional shepherd. He would be with his herd the whole time. They were never, so I think there are people who take action to live alongside them, but there are people who also, and I don't want to kind of, what's the word, take away from this feeling. They want they've inherited the lifestyle, which is that they are farmers, but they don't want to be up there all, all day and all night with their animals. So it's a tricky one. It's very easy to say, change your job. Well, it's not that easy. We know that these are people who have grown up. They are farmers. That's what they've always known. But they want an easier life because modern life has changed. And so it doesn't feel realistic, or I guess fair maybe, that people should be up there all the time with their animals. I mean, I'm trying to play devil's advocate here ultimately, which is that we just need to take into consideration that lives have changed, but really the only way that you combat probably, or that you live with wolf, is you make sure that your livestock are guarded.
Yeah, realistically, like, nobody really makes a living off of raising sheep anymore, just from the sheep. Like, I think you mentioned that the amount that you get for them is very low, and even with the cap that the EU reimburses a lot of these farmers, like, that's sometimes the only thing that makes it viable to have sheep and other livestock. So even if they wanted to spend all day with them, they have to do something else to make a living, and it's a tough one.
Well, that's actually such a good point. And the chap I mentioned earlier who had come over and said, I'm about to put my livestock up in the mountains, he is also a carpenter. Actually, in fact, that's his day to day. And is it a hobby, or is it a case of having two income streams to survive? I don't know is the answer. But you're right. A lot of these farmers, they are, living on the subsidies, which are generous. But they are also having other, they don't just do it. They are also, there's another chap in the village. He has horses, meat horses, and he is a mechanic. So, they are diversifying, actually. Mm-hmm. You're right. So they then can't be in the mountains. It's not, I guess, there are just so many different examples, but I think also the wolf has become like a political statement as well. It's not just about the wolf. It's about rural living. It's about, the unfairness of certain things, I think, and it's a common enemy, essentially, as well. So it's just so much more than the conflict, I would say.
Right.
As well.
Yeah, and we could go on about the challenges of farming in general and the small margins, and all day long. But you do hear about around the world, farmers are just having to do more, and they make less and less on what they actually farm. So, I
hope I didn't come across as like farmer bashing, because I am actually very much in awe of them. And a lot of, and I go into this in my story, is we came out wanting to kind of cover the story of the Iberian wolf, and we realized, who are we to turn around and tell people you need to live with wolves? We have no experience. That's not our role. And that's actually really where we then kind of decided, that we wanted to be here, that we wanted to kind of make change ourselves in terms of like the landscape, and ultimately not tell people what to do, but show people that we can do it and prove that we can live with wildlife. So really, that's what Wild Thinker is about. But we are also very, I would say, we do make it known we are not farmers. So equally, we're not here to tell farmers how to do it either. And I think that's an important kind of clarification as well.
Yeah, you're not just yelling from afar, you should do this. You're trying to walk the walk a bit.
Yeah.
So we've kind of touched on this a bit, but is there anything else you'd want to add about the history or the current status of the Iberian wolf? Because that's what the book is about in part, and it's important to kind of get the message out about that.
The situation has changed since even the book was published, and they are now once again a huntable species with permits. It is legal to hunt them, and I have friends a couple of valleys over. They had a wolf, and they were very excited about it. And then in the census that was released recently, those wolves were exterminated. So it's got quite sad for people who love wolves, really, because they are being persecuted once again.
Yeah, but are they also a protected species?
I don't really understand the intricacies of it, quite honestly. Essentially, the minute that the EU changed the protection of it, kind of the areas with wolf all basically put in quotas for controlling
Okay.
killing.
Yeah, that's kind of sad, but hopefully outreach and campaigns can kind of change the minds of locals who have to deal with it on a day-to-day basis. So you aren't just advocating for, the return of wolves to a far off land you'll never see. You're actually living in their habitat, like we mentioned. And you wrote that you do one day hope to welcome these wolves into your land. And you're taking actions to make your land wolf friendly. And you shared examples about how you've adapted to living with some other species that aren't as aggressive as wolves, but are still, predators in their own way. So how do you balance the alternating feelings of awe of nature and respect for these species with your concerns for, your own comfort and safety?
I never feel unsafe with wildlife. I think that's probably to do with the fact that the majority here doesn't pose a threat to me in the way that it might in, say, Africa, and certain parts of America and other countries. So I would probably say that I don't have a fear of wildlife. I think I mentioned in the book, actually, my biggest fear is hunters. We have a lot of driven boar hunts here, and the statistics on accidents, shootings, and injury and death from hunts is like, probably a 1,000,000% more than wildlife. So as a threat to me, I have not experienced that at any point, quite honestly. In terms of, we've had losses on the land we had a lamb hunting fox, which I just, I'd heard it, but I was like, really, foxes take lambs? Anyway, this was a big dog fox, and he took quite a few lambs before we really kind of worked it out, and then adapted and moved the sheep, and were more on hand when it came to lambing. We've lost loads of chickens to aerial predators, goshawks, but to me, and actually it was a friend of mine's dad said it, he said, if the rent for having a goshawk on your land is a chicken every now and again, I think it's a price worth paying. And that's the way we feel, to be living with goshawk overhead and eagles and the rest of it. That's just a great privilege. And to be honest, we take precautions during times when they're most active. The chickens stay in. We put them in every night. And actually, on the whole, we have lost more of all of our animals to dogs, dogs off the lead. We've lost, I tell quite a few stories actually in the book about losing like our whole duck flock to a dog off the lead. So actually, it's not the wildlife that we're having to learn to live with most of the time. It's domesticated dogs and
People.
people.
Yeah, and it's hard because, like, living on a farm or closer to nature, there will be losses. And even, like, this isn't the same at all, but when I had a garden, you kind of know, like, you're going to lose some to pests and other things, but you got to hope that there's like a balance to what's taken from nature and what you get to keep. And I guess it becomes a bit precarious when everything is decimated, like when all of the crops are gone and you're trying to be self-sufficient and you just can't manage to grow the things, like, speaking from experience, obviously, like how frustrating that must be on a wider scale. And you've mentioned that you guys are trying to live off the land and make it more as self-sustainable as possible. So I can only imagine, dealing with that day to day, but also having to just adapt your lifestyle to different things. So
yeah, it's a really good point, because of course I'm coming, we when we came, we were like, right, we are going to be self-sufficient and the rest of it. And then actually, and I think I say this in the book, but we like variety in our diet, and I like my coffee, and I have creature comforts that I like to indulge that I can't grow. And then on top of that, we come from such a privileged position that we are still at this moment in time able, if the crop fails, to be able, which is frustrating because of course you've put the effort into it, but be able to go to the shops and buy something. If the circumstances were different and there wasn't that option, then yes, I'm sure there would be So I think I have to take into consideration context as well.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of your crop failures, you said a lot of those were due to voles that would come in and steal your plants overnight, and it was interesting that this is a case where you actually welcomed the predators, the foxes or whatever that would eat the voles, and it's a good example of how you're working with nature to eradicate one pest rather than a lot of people would just go and throw poison out maybe, and then the birds are poisoned and everything else that eats it might get poisoned. So yeah, that's a good I guess example for folks that are thinking, how do you actually do it? This is one way.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is it might take a bit of time.
Yeah.
The frustrating thing about poison or pesticide or the rest of it is it's fast acting in that moment, but has longer term detrimental effects.
Mm-hmm.
However, if you work with nature, it might take a bit longer to work it out, but the long run, it's going to just be so much better for everyone involved.
Yeah, we're just so used to instant gratification and getting results right away, not having to wait.
Yeah.
So it's definitely something we need to change into the future if we're going to be more sustainable. But yeah, I also wanted to ask you about the hunters, which you mentioned, and I was just like flabbergasted that they were just allowed to free access to your land in the beginning, because they had always come there to hunt with the previous owner, and it was just expected that this right to roam existed even on private land. And yeah, the number of injuries and accidental deaths caused by these shootings of people just not seeing someone or not wearing high vis because they didn't know to or whatever. So can you kind of explain the mentality around hunting locally and even nationally, and whether it's helping or hindering wildlife management? Because I know there can be a place for hunting, with certain circumstances, but it sounds like it's just creating a lot of stress for the people around.
Oh, massively. The mentality I can't really explain. I guess it's a social thing, and yeah, an entertainment thing. But around us, it's mainly driven boar hunting. So what you have is, I don't know, like however many guns they set up, and then you have however many beaters, and each beater has 4 or 5 dogs off the lead running, and they're essentially driving the boar towards the guns. But the impact on the local ecosystem beyond the boar is just shocking, really. And I mentioned we actually, when we first arrived, we went to a couple of wolf hunts that were government sanctioned, and they carried one of the two that we went to were in spring, like the most sensitive time for animals and wildlife, bird life. And I just couldn't get over just the kind of the disturbance beyond the species they were targeting. So that's my struggle, because I'm with you. I think, hunting done in a certain way can be beneficial. And also, historically, it was kind of part of, who we were as humans. We were hunter gatherers, and it's probably still in our DNA. But it was, I don't know. I wasn't back then, so I can't tell you. But I imagine it was done quite differently. Certainly the like level of kind of how many people are involved, how many dogs are involved, and then how often it's done in an area. Like, it is better now, but in those early years, and it was quite interesting because my husband read bits of the book, but only when the book came out did he read it all through. And he was like, I forgot how regular they were. Those first years, it was relentless, and
Yeah.
it was exhausting. I mean, there was a point where we were like, we don't think we can live here. This is just, it's so, I guess our nervous system was so dysregulated by constantly kind of just spotting another person on our land, or,
Yeah.
more dogs running wild. And we were thinking, we're here to try and bring this back for nature. How the hell do we do that when twice a week, from September through till April, they're running dogs through the land and shooting boar? How do you do that? So we've come a long way, and that's in communication, because we still haven't removed our land from the hunting quota. We have to opt out of being in the hunting quota, and we've put the paperwork in. It's been in 3 years, and they still haven't opted us out. So it's less just purely on basically going out and being like, sorry, but we're here with our children, and Luke going out with a strimmer and doing a bit of kind of horse beating, just to be like, we're here, we're making noise, we're living on the land.
Yeah.
You can't.
3 years. That's insane. Like, that's clearly just purposeful, I don't know, avoidance or whatever.
They say there's a backlog. They say there's so many people trying to do it. It's a paperwork issue, and I'm like, I just don't think it is. I think it's big.
Yeah, even if that's the case, I guess it's a good thing that there's so many people wanting to opt out, but then they need to figure it out, like, clearly.
Quickly.
Yeah, a couple of things about that. One, it doesn't sound very sportsmanlike, or I don't know, if I was a hunter, to me the satisfaction would be in stalking your prey and getting, the shot in after like a few hours or a day, and not just, it just seems very unfair, just like pushing them all into, down a hill and then they're easy kills. Like, there's no satisfaction in that, in my opinion. And I'm not a hunter, but that's how I've heard a lot of them talk. And yeah, it reminds me, this is awful, but I'm from Texas, and years ago they passed a law that made it legal to hunt wild boar from a helicopter with a machine gun, basically, which is absolutely disgusting and awful. And yeah, like, I can't imagine, but we have a lot of land, and we do have a very big feral hog problem, and I guess that's the best way they think to deal with it. But yeah, it's similar to what you're saying, where you just completely unfair and make it as unsportsmanlike as possible. Well, I hope you get that resolved soon. And
Thank you. Yeah, and there is one more thing I think is worth flagging and really interesting. There is a study that has literally shown that essentially hunting makes the boar population more disturbed, more dispersed. They kind of they spread disease more. Essentially, the hunting pressure is more of a problem on kind of boar issues, because you're moving them around so much. There was boar running down the street in our like local town, and everyone's like, oh, we're overrun with boar. And it was like, no, the hunters were literally pushing them in, and so people aren't connecting. Hang on a minute. Yeah, we're not overrun, we're actually just pushing them around.
I'm just wondering, maybe you don't know this, but would having a more robust wolf population also help manage the boar population? Like, do they hunt boar, or is that completely different?
No, you're absolutely spot on, but the hunters don't want that because they want to hunt the boar.
Well, yeah, that's oh, it's so maddening. It's like the solutions are right there. Why are we making it so much harder than it needs to be?
Yeah.
Oh, jeez. Yeah, I couldn't imagine having to live with people just traipsing through, and then with guns on top of that. So hopefully the government can get that sorted, and you guys can, not have to deal with that. You already have enough stress trying to live off the land and everything. So going back to your goal of rewilding wild finca, that was what you called it. You wanted to rewild the land, and then you later learned about a new technique called agri-wilding. So can you talk about the difference between the two and why the latter made more sense for you all?
Absolutely, and I'll explain it to the best of my understanding, because the terms change quite frequently. But essentially, rewilding is a stepping away and letting the land do its own thing, and just completely kind of hands-off approach. And to an extent, we were doing this, but we had like, a handful of sheep and a couple of goats. But for the land that we kind of had, it wasn't really, it didn't make a huge impact. And what we started to notice that it was coming back, but coming back so quickly, and ultimately we were just going to end up with it all just being forest. And wild finca is just a lovely mosaic of habitats, and we were like, actually, what we're going to end up is with one uniform habitat, forest essentially. But we like the meadows, and we have meadow kind of species of butterfly that only live on meadows, and species of bird that benefit from like little scrubby bits. But of course, if you have a forest, then the scrubby bits, you lose those. So we realized that rewilding and completely going hands off and stepping away, we were going to lose what for us made wild finca magic, which was this like mosaic. And we then would have lost certain species as well. So kind of research and trial and error and just kind of getting to know the land better, we realized that we wanted to, that was kind of when we came across this concept of agri-wilding. And for me, the pioneer of this concept is Rebecca Hoskins. And she actually became a bit of a mentor for a little while during those years of trying to find our feet and working out exactly what we wanted to apply to the land. And this concept of agri-wilding is using kind of agricultural livestock essentially, but in place of ancient proxy. So they are proxy for species that would have been here anciently. Anciently, is that the word? Anyway, in the past. And so we started with the sheep, but the sheep then didn't work for us. And I go through all the trials and tribulations of that. So obviously, since the book's come out, our kind of approach has really got, changed quite dramatically. We now have cows. We don't have the sheep anymore. And we have a little herd of cows, a little herd of horses. The horses we do have in the book, and I document that journey with them. And they are a local breed called Astacons. And I have a terrible memory for numbers, but essentially Pliny the Elder, which is like an ancient naturalist, he wrote about them. So they've been around a very, very long time. And then we have Cassina cattle, which are, again, the local autochthonous species of cattle. They're short-legged, very good on kind of mountain. And it really is amazing to watch them. They are such amazing kind of landscape agitators. The diversity of what they eat is amazing. And essentially we've become the wolf in respect that we move them on so that they aren't overgrazing areas, so that they aren't kind of, by moving them on, we can ensure that that kind of plant diversity remains and that they're not just eating and, making it just grassland. So it's an ongoing, it's a movable feast. We're constantly learning, and we're also reading the land. So many of our decisions are based on looking and seeing. And if things aren't, we have, like, for example, we're really getting to know our orchid population. And in fact, that was one of the reasons we got rid of the sheep, was that they would just destroy the orchids. There'd be no orchids after the sheep had been through. And there are other reasons, and I kind of explain those in the book as well, that they just weren't suited to our landscape. So, that's kind of, I guess, rewilding is this idea that you just don't touch it at all. We realised that we wanted to maintain the mosaic we had, and we've basically gone through the processes that agri-wilding allows us to do this. And we've essentially been refining what animals we use. Yeah.
It's amazing to me when I read books or just hear stories of places being rewilded or agri-wilded, that how fast nature will come back if you just give it a chance. Sometimes. Now, there's certain things obviously that take longer, but you even noted some of the changes you noticed year to year or season to season, just from changing one or two things, like you said, relieving the grazing population or stress on one area. And it makes me feel a little hopeful in a time when, you hear so much bad news that, we actually could just fix this. It's the same with, like, studies have shown protecting marine areas, for a very short time results in a huge explosion of population. And it's like everywhere we look, nature is dying to come back. So, like, let's just give it a chance.
Couldn't agree more.
Well, the principle of agri-wilding's kind of a new one for me, but the idea, or one of the principles that stood out the most for me in what you listed, was never sacrifice and destroy ecological wealth for financial gain. When money is tight, find another way. And I just found that very profound, and I think so many of the world's problems would be prevented if more people thought this way, just in general. Don't sacrifice nature for money. Period.
I'd like to credit Rebecca Hoskins with that. That's one of her, I think I list her rules of, like, agri-wilding within the book. And it's just beautiful, and it's very much been one of the guiding lights of how we approach Wild Thinker and how we live our lives.
Yeah. And I'll link to that, her work in the show notes as well. So folks can check that out if they want. So we're coming towards the end, but you kind of mentioned that your work has been a lot of trial and error with a lot of challenges such as weather, the pandemic, wildfires, unruly animals, and of course navigating local dynamics. So it's hard, never-ending work, and yet, as we mentioned, you've seen so many changes in a relatively short time. So what are some of the changes that you're the most proud of?
I mean, it just looks beautiful. It's messy and it's rugged and it's alive, and you just have to walk across the land and you're hearing, I mean, goodness knows how many birds, and spotting goodness knows how many different types of bugs. Our boys were born here, and I think sharing it with them has been one of the just biggest privileges as well. Like raising them on the land is such a privilege, and I learned so much from them and their curiosity as well. So yeah, I'd say probably that those two things, just the general feeling of being, walking the land and being able to do that with my boys.
It's got to be so exciting every time you find a new species, or just discover something new that nature has done. Like, I can't imagine how rewarding that is.
Yeah, and even just things like each year, migrating species, welcoming species back, or it's just you get to know certain like areas or trees kind of like family. So it doesn't even have to be new. It's just if I haven't seen it in a couple of weeks and I go and am with it or spend time with it, just makes me feel happy,
Yeah, and kind of experience that on a much smaller scale with my tiny little like 3x3 garden beds in my old house. And I don't think it takes much. Like, even if you have a potted plant outdoors and you can see bees or butterflies coming to it, and when caterpillars get laid and they start growing, and just every little thing that happens is amazing. And you think to yourself, where did you come from? Like, I'm in the middle of a city, I'm in the middle of a concrete oasis, and yet these things manage to find you with just a little bit of water or dirt or flowers. So anyone can really experience that on a smaller scale even.
Oh, and I think that's it. So I've actually I've just launched my kind of, I guess, my new project, my new passion. It's called The Wild Shift, and it's essentially like a mentorship to help families connect with nature on a deeper level. And it's that level. It's kind of exactly what you're describing. It's really kind of noticing in a way that you don't, and allowing that noticing to kind of take root and for you to experience it, because when you genuinely connect and experience nature, it's life-changing. It's so powerful. So I'm really excited to be doing that work now as well, and it feels like a very natural progression really from No Paradise with Wolves and our journey here at Wild, and sharing that. And exactly as you say, and I very much believe this as well, is you do not have to go far to engage and enjoy. In fact, some of my boys' like most exciting nature moments have been in cities. They found like a stag beetle in the middle of a town, and a snipe feather, so my point, exactly what you've just said as well, like we're very fortunate here, but I've spent a lot of my career telling stories about urban wildlife, and that was for many years like a huge motivator for myself and my husband, was sharing with people what's on their doorstep. So I feel I've done a bit of a circle there, even though I might be living somewhere quite remote. I'm kind of back to really helping people just open their eyes to what's on their doorstep and knowing how to engage with it in a way that feels really good and joyful and hopeful.
Yeah. Even just seeing a flower growing from a crack in the sidewalk is like a miracle. Like, how did you find that one little tiny bit of dirt and manage to germinate and have enough light and water, and you grow better than the plants that's like living spoiled in my windowsill that has too much water and it just dies, like, yeah, so really cool that you get to experience that and that you're sharing it with the world. Did you say the farm is open for tours or nature tours, I guess, now, or are you guys still working on that?
No, we are kind of from April. We tend to do kind of April to October. We do half-day tours. Yeah, and if you are in the area, just reach out. I also have like a list of local accommodation I recommend. You can't stay with us, but it's better this way because then the local community get to experience people coming for nature tourism, and that's hopefully a bit of a ripple effect as well if we're sharing and people come and visit and then go back to the hotel and say, oh, this was where we were and we were here for the wildlife. We're hoping that could be another way to engage local community to appreciate it.
Yeah, and then if they're hearing it from these tourists who are giving them money, they might be more apt to listen than from you guys who are just kind of the crazy new folks who moved in and want to change everything in their minds. I meant to ask you this as well. Like you said in the book, you used some workaways to help with some of this stuff. How was your experience with that and having kind of new perspectives and people helping around the farm?
We love it. We love having workaways here, and I'd say 90% of our experiences have been just wonderful. My boys love it. It brings in different dynamics, different kind of cultural experiences. So yeah, no, I've only got good things to say about pretty much all our workaways, to be honest.
Yeah. That's great. I've looked into doing it myself a couple times on vacations, but I've never quite managed to take the leap, but maybe someday. Well, is there anything we haven't touched on that you want to before we move on?
No, I think that's everything. It's been a lot of fun chatting.
Yeah, definitely. Well, you've already shared quite a bit, but what are some resources that you would share with our listeners who want to learn more about anything we've talked about?
There's a couple of books that I just adore. I adore Wilding by Isabella Tree. I absolutely adore Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wimmerer. I think if you want to get involved with anything like this, just look at your local. If you're in the UK, the wildlife trusts are fantastic. The RSPB is fantastic. Essentially, kind of your local nature NGOs. One of my things my husband did when he was growing up is he would go and do what was called like work parties, which was go to his local nature reserve and just go and kind of help out, volunteer. So they can have wonderful resources as well. Off the top of my head, that's probably the main ones.
Yeah, I second Braiding Sweetgrass. I've read that one and I listened to it, and her voice is just so melodic as well. And I have Wilding on my shelf, so I definitely need to give that a read. Great resources, and we will link to all these in the show notes, of course. So yeah, I guess we'll move on to our Green Life Hack portion of the show, where we share one thing that listeners can do to live more sustainably, or one practice they can implement into their lives. So Katie, would you like to start us out?
Gosh, it's probably such an obvious one, but composting.
Yeah.
I know it's not for everyone though, and I also appreciate that it's but there are ways. There are ways.
I feel like more and more cities are offering curbside pickup, or there are like third parties that are offering those services. I had a friend back in Texas who started her own for a while, and so there are things you can do even if you live in an apartment in the city.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry, I've made it's a little bit harder. I get that as well, but certainly I think that's one of the big ones for me, is it just makes such a difference.
Yeah, for sure. Well, mine is kind of in theme with what we've talked about today, and it's just basically stopping to notice nature around you, like we were just speaking about, whether it's the literal roses growing on the side of someone's yard. And I actually just saw this adorable video of Kristen Bell at the Golden Globes, I think, and she's in this beautiful gown, but she just can't get over the roses that are everywhere, and they're like, the size of a saucer plate. And she's like, these are real, you guys. And she's pointing them out to everyone, and they're just like, what's wrong with her? And finally somebody comes up who's like, oh my God, are those real? But just seeing the joy in her face at being at this corporate event, and she's just like geeking out over the roses. But yeah, try to find those moments, like if you're walking through a dirty city and you happen to see the flower growing out of the crack, or you see a bumblebee or a bird, or even me, like I live in the city, but I'm very close to the beach, and I don't have to walk very far to see the amazing nature that's right along the beach. So even if I feel like I'm in a, nothing but concrete, it is there. You just have to kind of look for it. So we're just.
I think I got that's a beautiful one, and I think I got distracted by the like sustainability element of the question, which is why I went.
Oh no!
I'm gonna second that, and I'm gonna say, take a habit outside, take a daily habit outside. So if that's a cup of tea, Brits in particular, they love a cup of tea.
Yeah.
But take your habit outside, and try and identify a bird call. Try and spot, I don't know, 3 different colours in nature. Basically, go outside, take your habit outside, and just let your eye be drawn by something. And if you have to direct it, fine, or just enjoy the moment. But yeah, I'm a big one for kind of daily habits.
Yeah,
they can totally transform your life. I'm going to go that far. And if you can make a daily habit with nature and spending time in nature, it's a game changer.
For sure. Yeah, I think we've all kind of gotten more and more disconnected from nature in the lifestyles we live, but it doesn't take much to kind of just ease back into connecting. So well, thank you so much, Katie, for sharing your journey and your knowledge with us. It's been really fascinating, and I am excited to see what Wild Finca does next. Where can we find you, the book, anything you want to plug online or out in the world?
Yeah, everything that we kind of are up to is over on our website, www.wildfinca.com. And actually, we've just uploaded a brand new little film on there, which I'm really chuffed with. It gives a real insight into kind of what we've achieved so far and what our vision is going forward. And you can follow us on Instagram at wildfinca. You can get my book, is also available really wherever you get your books from. It's called No Paradise with Wolves. But again, if you are a bit stuck for where to get it, there is a link on the wildfinca.com website where you can click.
Ask your local booksellers to order it for you.
Exactly. Ideally that, exactly. Yeah. Which it does say on there as well.
Yeah.
And then the Wild Shift as well, if you'd like any more news on that, that's also on the Wild Finca website. So head there.
Great. And we'll, again, link all those in the show notes so you can learn more. And you can find our show, Sustainably Geeky, on Instagram, Blue Sky, and Facebook, YouTube, and anywhere you listen to podcasts. And, of course, we are on buymeacoffee.com/sustainablygeeky if you'd like to support the show that way. Me personally, you can find me on Instagram and Blue Sky at Het's Gonna Be Me. And be sure to follow us, like us, share us wherever you can. And thank you so much for listening. Have a great rest of your day.